Alright guys, welcome back to another video. So in this one we're going to be doing another simple lathe project, and that is making a couple different plates. There's something that seems fairly simple enough to turn, and just something that seems kind of fun and enjoyable to do, and has a very cool and useful final form. So we're going to be making them two different ways. The first way is we're going to be making a panel out of this piece of walnut here. So the best way I can think to do this is to actually make a couple plates at a time. So we're going to be milling up a few pieces from here, and so we're also going to be making one from this cherry blank that I've got here that's about 1.5 inches thick. Now, there's a very specific reason why I'm going with the paneled version on this side and then the 1.5 inch thick piece on the other trial. And so the main reason for that is because here in Alberta, we don't really have access to a wide range of woods. Basically, the lumber yards that I go to, I have access to 4/4 and 8/4 versions. Now, in some woods like maple, I do have access to that 6/4 size, but again, that's only in maple, not any of the other woods that I'd like to work with. So in order to get that 1.5 inches that I need in order to turn a plate, and I have turned a couple plates before, so this won't be the first time I've done it, but I've found that I need that 1.5 inch thickness in order to not cause damage to my tools and, just nasty things overall. Alright, so just ignore the marks on my face. The dust mask is pretty tight, but let's talk about this first plate. So this is the one that was just made from a single piece of cherry, and I made a pretty big mistake on it, and that is I went too deep, and after knowing, I double checked multiple times how far I was going to go in the depth, and I just ended up going more for some stupid reason, and I ended up hitting the screws that are coming through from the faceplate. I actually hit them pretty good. There's a decent amount of them actually showing. So that is not what you want to do. I do have a small nick in the front of my bowl gouge, which I now have to figure out how to get out because, like I mentioned earlier in the video, I don't currently have a good way to sharpen that thing. So this is poor planning on my part, but it is what it is, and we're gonna have to figure out how to deal with that. But overall, I'm super happy with how this plate came out. Now I'm gonna do some final hand sanding with some 400 grit sandpaper, just because we do have some swirls and all that left over from the 220 grit, and it'll just be easier to go in through and just hand sand some of this out on both sides before I apply some finish to it. Alright, so we're now done with the bowls. I know that I said I was going to try and fix up that first cherry bowl. I've got it right here. I think I'm just going to leave it as a little bit of a reminder to myself. I might try and come back to it and, mess around with it. But when I was re-drilling those holes or enlarging them, there was a decent amount of tear out around those holes, so I realized that that's not really an option. Kind of once you screw up there, you're kind of screwed the whole way through. So it's a nice enough plate. I think that I'm going to retry doing something like this just with another piece of cherry or a nice wide piece. The next time I go to a lumberyard, I'll try and find something nice and wide like this and give this another shot. But what I did discover is a way better way to do this. So on the second one I made, these walnut ones are the same thickness as that cherry one was, but they are narrow. They're 8 inches instead of 9 inches, so they have a little bit more curvature, so they're more like a bowl than a plate. But what I discovered is that I could start using my chuck rather than putting trying to move the faceplate from one side to the other, all by using a 1.5 inch Forstner bit. So I didn't think that I'd be able to run a 1.5 inch Forstner bit on the lathe here, because typically it's recommended that you don't go above 250 RPM with that size of a Forstner bit. But the lathe here goes down to about 400, which seemed to work just fine. It cut a clean enough hole as long as I took it nice and slow. And so that's what I did on this second plate here. Now this plate is all finished up except for the bottom. I just have to go in and clean it, add some oil and clean it up a little bit. I'm going to leave the screw holes on this one because again, I want to remember that I don't really want to mount the faceplate here unless I have to. Also, I didn't actually do any work to the bottom of this. So it is mostly flat, but there is some, there's a visible glue seam and all that, which doesn't look great. So this is not going to be a bowl that's for sale, but it's a good reminder to myself. And so basically how it works with the chuck is that I just drilled a 3/8 deep hole with that 1.5 inch Forstner bit into the bottom of the wood. Then I could use my spigot jaws, which have little teeth on them, and it's a fairly narrow set of jaws, to go inside of that hole and then put pressure from the inside. The last one here, I did knock down the sides a little bit when I was doing the final turning, so it's more of a, I don't know, kind of a little platter, not really a bowl, not really a plate, but it's got, about 1 inch tall sidewalls, so it's somewhere in between. But again, I absolutely love how it came out. I still have to do the finishing on the bottom, but right off the lathe here, other than adding a little bit of oil to the very bottom area, this thing is ready to go. I could throw this in a box and ship it off. It's completely done. There's no final sanding like when I was trying to work with the faceplate where I would have had to fill the holes and then sand it. This is just fully sanded and ready to go. So it's really cool just by working with the chuck. Another benefit of the chuck is that I could just take the plate off the lathe, I could soak it down with water, put it back on the chuck and do my final sanding. That way I can make sure that I'm popping all the grain and just making sure that when this bowl gets wet in the future, that grain's not going to raise up again. So the chuck is just a really awesome way to work. I'm really glad that I figured out a way to use it because at first I just couldn't think of a way to put the chuck to good use. And so here we are. So anyway, that is enough of a rant for the end of this project here. As always, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in the next one.